The sun was sinking behind the jagged cliffs, painting the sky with streaks of fire and gold, when Alara stumbled into the deserted canyon. Her hand pressed to the small swell of her belly. Alone and pregnant, she had nowhere to turn. Every step she took kicked up clouds of dust, each one a reminder of the emptiness that had followed her from town to town. Her simple dress, stitched with beads and feathers, clung to her trembling frame, a faint shield against the chill creeping into the evening air. She had heard whispers in the settlement, judgmental voices that made her want to vanish from the world entirely. As she leaned against a weathered rock trying to catch her breath, a shadow detached itself from the cliffs. Her heart skipped. Few travel these lands, and fewer still at this hour. Then she saw him, a muscular Native American warrior with long black hair and tribal jewelry. Always shirtless, with a fit, model-like muscular build, small tribal tattoos on his arms and chest, and beads and bones strung around his neck that caught the fading sunlight, moved with the quiet confidence of someone who belonged entirely to this land, the mountains and rivers themselves, bowing to his presence. "Are you hurt?" his voice rumbled, low and steady, yet gentle. Alara froze, unsure if she could trust him. His eyes, dark and piercing, held no judgment, only curiosity and an unspoken offer of protection. I don't know," she admitted, clutching her stomach instinctively. The past weeks had been hard. The village had shunned her after the news of her pregnancy spread. Her family had turned their backs, leaving her with nothing but whispered curses and cold stares. Now in this canyon that seemed both a prison and a sanctuary, she had stumbled upon the last man she ever expected to meet, the last man who could love her. Before she could answer further, the warrior extended a hand. "You don't have to be afraid. The land won't harm you. Neither will I." Alara hesitated, her instincts battling her fear, but something in his calm, unwavering gaze made her step forward. This was not just a man. It was a presence that filled the space around her, a force of nature tempered with patience and strength. She noticed how the tribal jewelry jingled softly with his movements, the small tattoos telling stories she could only guess at. There was an honesty about him, a raw honesty that she had not seen in anyone since leaving her village. As they walked together toward a hidden grove, the tension in Alara's shoulders slowly began to ease. The canyon walls whispered secrets in the wind, and for the first time in weeks she felt a flicker of hope. "I'm Alara," she whispered, almost afraid to speak her own name aloud. He nodded once. "I am Tokuda." Even the sound of his name seemed to ground her, like a chain securing her heart after months of drifting. As they moved deeper into the grove, Alara noticed the small fire pit surrounded by stones, already prepared, as if he had been expecting someone like her. She realized that she had stumbled upon a man who not only understood survival in this harsh land, but also understood compassion in a way that her heart had almost forgotten. "You must be hungry," Tokuda said, gesturing to the fire. "Sit." Alara obeyed, still wary, but grateful. As she watched him gather herbs and hunt small game with skill that seemed almost effortless, she felt a strange mix of fear and fascination. His muscular form moved with the precision of a dancer, yet there was a raw power behind every motion. She could see the strength in his arms, the toned chest rising and falling with each breath. And yet there was gentleness in the way he treated the fragile sprigs of wild plants he was harvesting. For the next hour, they spoke little, allowing the crackling fire to bridge the silence. Then, in the quiet moments, Tokuda asked the question that lingered in the air like smoke. "Why are you alone, Alara?" She swallowed hard, the weight of her secret pressing down on her. I have no one. I was shunned." His gaze softened. "The land does not shun. The rivers do not judge. The wind carries no cruelty." Something about the way he said this made her heart ache and hope all at once. She wanted to tell him everything, to confess the fear that had shadowed her days and nights, but words caught in her throat. Yet she knew, in a way that frightened her, that he could understand. Tokuda had the look of a man who had known hardship, who had walked alone and come out stronger on the other side. Alara had always believed that love was a luxury she could no longer afford, but standing here with the firelight dancing across Tokuda's features, she felt the possibility stirring in her chest. Not the shallow love she had once dreamed of as a girl, but a love grounded in trust, survival, and raw honesty. the kind of love that could mend wounds deeper than the eye could see. As night fully embraced the canyon, the stars appearing one by one in the dark sky, Dakota draped a simple blanket over Alara's shoulders. "Rest," he said. "Tomorrow's a long day." Alara nodded, her body relaxing into the warmth. For the first time since leaving her village, she allowed herself to believe that she might not be entirely alone. That perhaps the last man who could love her had found her when she needed him most. The wind rustled through the trees, carrying with it a sense of both promise and danger. She had no idea what the future held, whether the past would catch up to her, or if she would ever fully trust this enigmatic warrior. Yet in that moment, there was a fragile peace, the kind that comes before storms, the kind that makes the heart beat faster with both hope and fear. Elar's thoughts wandered to her child, growing inside her, and to the life she had almost given up on. She had thought her story ended in shame and solitude, but here, in the wild expanse of the canyon, the story seemed poised to take a turn she could never have imagined. Somewhere deep in the night, the faint howl of a coyote echoed across the cliffs. Dakota rose, scanning the horizon with sharp eyes, his muscular frame silhouetted against the moonlight. Lara realized then that he was not only strong but vigilant, protective of both her and the life she carried. She felt a shiver run through her, not from fear, but from the realization that the man who stood before her could very well change everything she thought she knew about survival, trust, and love. And yet, just as the fire crackled and their quiet companionship settled like a fragile blanket over the grove, the distant sound of approaching hooves shattered the stillness. Ilara's heart leaped into her throat. Who could it be at this hour, deep in the canyon, where few dared to travel? Dakota's eyes narrowed, muscles tensing as he read the threat in the shadows. Ilara could sense the danger before she saw it. The wind carried the scent of strangers' men who were not welcome in this sacred land. She wanted to speak, to cry out, but the words caught in her throat. All she could do was clutch her belly and pray that the warrior who had found her would be enough to keep them both safe. The night had begun with silence, with a chance encounter in a deserted canyon. Now it teetered on the edge of chaos. Ilara knew, with a mixture of fear and exhilaration, that her life and her child's would never be the same again. Somewhere beyond the firelight, the future waited, and it was up to her and Dakota to face it together. Before the dawn could break, before the first light could reveal what the canyon truly held, they braced for what was coming. Lyra's mind raced, her heart pounding, and in the quiet moments, she whispered the only words she could. "Can he really be the last man who could love me?" Dakota's steady presence was her only answer, but even that could not fully chase away the uncertainty. If you are enjoying this story on Western Love Story, make sure to like and subscribe now, because the next chapter will reveal secrets that could change everything for Ilara and Dakota. And as the canyon held its breath, the night waited to tell its tale. Ilara's eyes darted toward the shadows beyond the firelight as the hooves grew louder. Her heart hammered in her chest, each beat echoing the fear she could not fully name. Dakota's hand hovered near a carved stone knife at his belt, his gaze scanning the horizon with an intensity that made the canyon itself seem to shrink around him. The night air carried the scent of smoke, dust, and something else, something sharp, like the promise of trouble. "Stay close," Dakota murmured, his voice low, vibrating with power and warning. His muscular frame tensed, every small tribal tattoo seeming to glow in the firelight, telling stories of battles fought and lands protected. He moved silently, almost gliding across the rocky ground, as if the canyon itself responded to his presence. Ilara wrapped her hands tighter around her belly, the small swells of her native-style dress shifting as she followed his lead. You live here?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The question trembled in the wind, but Dakota's eyes never left the approaching threat. "This land has always been mine, and I, in return, protect it," he said, his voice calm, commanding, yet gentle enough to keep her heart steady. "The ones coming are not welcome. They will learn soon enough." Ilara's mind raced. Who could dare approach a place so isolated? She thought of the towns she had fled, of faces twisted with judgment, and she realized that danger often followed her, though she had tried to escape it. And yet here, under the protection of Dakota, she felt a fragile thread of hope. He was strong, unyielding, and somehow entirely human, a rare combination she had never encountered before. The riders emerged from the darkness, cloaked in dust and shadow. Their faces were hidden beneath worn hats, their intentions unreadable. But Alara could feel the tension in the air like a living thing. Tokoda stepped in front of her, chest forward, the small beads of his tribal jewelry catching what little light remained. His long black hair swayed with the movement of his muscles, the fit, model-like build of his body radiating power and authority. He didn't speak, but the presence alone warned the strangers, "Come closer and there will be consequences." Ilara's pulse quickened. She had survived judgment, ridicule, and loneliness, but she had never seen anyone confront danger like this. There was a strange beauty in the way Tokoda moved, the way he claimed space without arrogance, the way he balanced strength and precision. She found herself stealing glances, her fear mingling with awe, realizing that this man could protect her in ways she had never dared to imagine. One of the riders raised a hand, speaking in low, hurried tones. Takoda's eyes narrowed. He understood their language in a way that went beyond words, a knowledge of human intent that made him almost untouchable. Then, without a sound, he shifted, muscles coiling like a panther ready to spring. Ilara felt a surge of both fear and relief. He was her shield. He was her hope. Yet even as the immediate threat hovered, Ilara's mind returned to the path that had brought her here. Weeks ago, she had been alone in a small town at the edge of the prairie, hiding from those who had shunned her. Every glance, every whispered word had driven her deeper into isolation. Her pregnancy, once a source of fragile joy, had become a burden in the eyes of those who should have cared. Her family, her friends, they had all turned away, leaving her with nothing but memories and a relentless sense of shame. She had fled under the cover of night. Carrying only a small satchel filled with essentials, her native-style dress swaying with each hurried step. The prairie had seemed endless, a blank canvas stretching to the horizon, but loneliness had followed her like a shadow. And then, as if guided by fate, she had stumbled into the canyon where Tokoda waited, the last man who could offer her more than just survival. Tokoda's gaze softened briefly as he noticed her thoughts. "You carry more than just a child," he said, his tone gentle. "You carry fear, loss, and a longing for something that has been taken from you." Ilara nodded, the words catching in her throat. She had not expected to meet someone who could understand the depth of her pain without asking, without prying. Here was a man who saw her, truly saw her, and yet did not recoil. The strangers on horseback began to dismount, their movements deliberate, testing the boundaries of the canyon. Instead, he moved closer to Ilara, his muscular body forming a barrier between her and the danger. She noticed again the small tribal tattoos tracing his biceps and chest, the beads around his neck shimmering faintly in the firelight. There was a story in every detail of him, a history she longed to understand. "Why do they come here?" Ilara whispered, her voice trembling. "Some things are drawn to what they do not understand," Tokoda said. "Others seek what they cannot have. And some, they follow you." His gaze flicked toward her, and she felt a shiver run down her spine. The intensity in his eyes was both terrifying and comforting. "Do not fear the path ahead. Fear is the tool they use, not the weapon they wield." Ilara tried to grasp the meaning, but her attention was pulled back to the strangers, who were now moving closer, boots crunching against rock and dust. The canyon's natural shadows gave them cover, but Takoda's presence seemed to stretch the boundaries, making the air thick with anticipation. She could feel the power emanating from him, a combination of muscle, skill, and something more, an unspoken knowledge of survival that bordered on instinct. Her mind drifted to her own survival. She had grown up learning small ways to endure, finding water, avoiding danger, listening to the land, but she had never faced anything like this, never faced someone who could be the last hope for both herself and the child growing inside her. She realized with a jolt that Takoda was not just a protector. He was a key to something she had thought impossible: trust, companionship, maybe even love. The strangers paused at the edge of the firelight, speaking in hurried whispers, their intentions still unclear. Takoda's muscles tensed further, the long black hair swinging slightly with his movement. Ilara noticed the way he shifted his weight, the careful precision in every step. and realized that she was witnessing a man who had mastered the art of survival in ways that went far beyond the physical. "Stay behind me," he instructed softly, and she obeyed instinctively, feeling the warmth of his body and the weight of his strength. She wrapped her native-style dress tighter around herself, feeling fragile yet oddly protected in this wilderness. The fire casting flickering shadows across her face. Time seemed to stretch as the strangers assessed the situation, unsure whether to engage or retreat. Tokuda remained still, unyielding, the small tribal jewelry around his neck, catching the firelight in subtle glints. Elara found herself studying him, noticing the interplay of light and shadow across his toned, model-like form, the tattoos that hinted at stories she could only imagine. He was both wild and disciplined, untamed, yet deeply connected to the land he claimed as his own. She remembered the first moments she had seen him, emerging from the cliffs like a vision, and felt a strange sense of destiny. The canyon had brought them together, two souls marked by isolation, grief, and survival instincts, and now it seemed poised to test them further. The strangers began to move forward again, and Takuda shifted his stance, muscles coiled and ready, eyes like dark fire. Elara's hands tightened around her belly as the tension in the air thickened. She realized with a mixture of fear and anticipation that the coming moments would define everything: her survival, her child's future, and perhaps even her heart. She had come into this canyon alone and pregnant, with nothing but fear and memories of rejection. Now, with Takuda by her side, she felt the first stirrings of hope, but hope alone would not be enough. The night was far from over, and the canyon held secrets that neither of them could fully see. And as the strangers drew closer, their intentions finally becoming clear, Elara understood that the real test was about to begin. It's not just for her, not just for Takuda, but for the fragile bond forming between them. A bond forged in fear, courage, and the silent promise of something more. Somewhere beyond the firelight, in the shadows of the canyon, destiny waited. And Elara, alone no longer, had no choice but to face it. The canyon held its breath as the strangers crept closer, their boots crunching over rocks and dry leaves. Elara's hands trembled, her native-style dress brushing against the dusty ground. She felt the weight of her pregnancy pressing against her spine, but fear pressed harder. Takuda's presence beside her was a solid wall, his muscular form tensed, long black hair swinging slightly as he adjusted his stance. His tribal jewelry jingled softly with every movement, the beads and small bones catching the firelight. Even shirtless, his fit, model-like muscular build radiated strength, each small tattoo telling stories of battles survived, promises kept, and lands protected. "Do you know them?" Lara whispered, her voice barely audible. Takuda's dark eyes never left the riders. "They mean harm." The strangers spoke in hushed tones, exchanging glances that were sharp with suspicion and malice. One of them, taller than the others, drew a knife from his belt, and Elara's stomach knotted with dread. Tokuda's jaw tightened. The muscles of his arms flexed, small tattoos seeming to come alive in the firelight. He had always been a man of few words, letting his actions speak, and now those actions were about to write a new story. As the riders closed in, Elara noticed another figure moving away from the group, a woman in tattered clothing with a face partially hidden under a wide-brimmed hat. There was hesitation in her movements, a sense of uncertainty that mirrored the fear in Elara's own heart. She wondered what connection this stranger might have to the men advancing toward them. Was she friend, foe, or simply a bystander drawn into a dangerous path? Takuda stepped slightly in front of Elara, positioning his muscular body as a barrier. The wind carried the scent of sage and smoke from the fire, mingling with the sharp temps of the approaching strangers. His long black hair framed a face that was both striking and intimidating. Every line of his body spoke of discipline, of a life molded by hardship and survival. The small tribal jewelry around his neck swayed gently, marking him as a warrior of the land, untouchable yet deeply human. The taller man spoke, his voice low and threatening. "Step aside. We mean no harm. If you cooperate." Takuda's eyes flicked to the man. "You leave now, or face what you do not understand." Elara's heart thumped. Words would not save them if the strangers chose violence. She could see it in their eyes. They were calculating, experienced, and unafraid of the canyon's shadows. Yet Tokuda did not flinch. He did not even blink. There was an unspoken message in his posture. This is my land, my choice, my protection, and I do not yield. The woman from the group stepped closer, revealing more of her face. Alara saw sharp eyes and a determined set to her jaw. "Wait," she said, her voice cutting through the tension. "He doesn't need to fight. I can talk to him." Takota's gaze shifted to the woman, his muscular frame remaining in front of Alara. "Who are you?" he demanded. Voice steady, but carrying the weight of authority. The woman hesitated. I'm called Sienna. Don't want trouble. Just passage. We have information about the man who hunts this land, about threats to your tribe." Ilara's mind spun. Information. Threats. She had thought the night's dangers were limited to survival, yet now it seemed the canyon had secrets layered deeper than she had imagined. Takota's eyes narrowed, scanning the group and assessing each individual. The firelight reflecting off his small tribal tattoos, revealing subtle shifts in expression that spoke volumes. "You speak of threats," he said carefully, "then speak clearly. But lie, and you will regret it." Sienna swallowed hard, her eyes flicking toward the taller men behind her. "There is a band of raiders. They've been taking women from nearby settlements. They've heard of a pregnant girl alone, and they follow her. They mean to take her for leverage." To weaken the tribes in the region, Alara's stomach twisted. She was that girl. Alone, pregnant, vulnerable. And now she realized the true depth of the danger that had been stalking her path. Takota's jaw tightened, and the muscles along his arms and chest flexed with controlled fury. "You are lucky we found you first," he said, voice low and dangerous. "And you owe your life to this land, and to the strength it provides. Remember that?" Ilara clutched her belly instinctively, realizing that survival depended on more than just fleeing. She had to trust Tokota, trust the land, and perhaps trust herself in ways she had never allowed. Sienna hesitated. "There is more. They have a leader, a man called Garrick. He's cunning, ruthless. They'll come tonight if they know where she is. You need a plan." Takota's dark eyes narrowed further, and his long black hair fell over his shoulders as he moved with the grace of a predator ready to strike. "Then we prepare. They will not take what belongs to this land, and they will not touch her." Alara noticed the firelight flickering against his muscular, model-like build, each tattoo sharp in contrast, telling the story of a warrior ready to defend without hesitation. She felt both fear and awe. He was not just a protector, it was a force she had never encountered, a man shaped by survival, loyalty, and something deeper, something that made her pulse quicken in ways she didn't yet understand. As the group of strangers hesitated at the edge of the canyon, a sudden rustle from above drew everyone's attention. A hawk circled, wings cutting the air, its shadow moving across the canyon walls. Takota's eyes followed it, then darted back to Alara. "The land speaks," he said. "We are not alone in watching." Alara shivered. The canyon seemed alive, the shadows moving in response to the tension. She realized that survival here was not just about strength, it was about understanding the land, the people, and the invisible threads connecting both. Tokota was the key to that understanding, his presence a bridge between fear and hope. The strangers murmured among themselves, uncertainty beginning to show. Tokota stepped forward, every muscle in his body taut and ready. His small tribal tattoos seemed to ripple as if alive, the beads and bones around his neck catching the last of the firelight. He was a man molded by this land, shaped by the trials of survival, yet deeply human, capable of patience, protection, and perhaps one day love. Ilara's mind raced. She had come into the canyon seeking refuge, only to find herself caught in a dangerous web she barely understood. Yet with Tokota by her side, she felt the first spark of courage she had felt in months. She understood instinctively that her survival depended on him and that his fight was not just for her, but for the land itself. As the wind picked up, scattering dust and small leaves across the fire, the tension thickened. The strangers would not leave without testing the boundaries. Takota's muscles coiled like springs, his long black hair swinging, tribal jewelry jingling, every motion precise, calculated. Alara pressed closer to him, feeling the strength radiating from his shirtless, muscular body. She could sense the power and the calm that came from experience, from a life shaped by the wilderness and by battles fought in silence. The canyon seemed to wait, every shadow holding a secret, every sound amplified in the stillness. Ilara realized that the night would not end quietly. The band of raiders was patient, and they were hunting her specifically. Her pulse quickened, and she whispered a silent plea to the land, to Takada, to the child inside her. Tokoda's dark eyes met hers, and she saw in them not just strength, but a promise that he would not let them fall. He read the tension in her gaze and offered the only reassurance he could: readiness. His fit, model-like body, muscular and adorned with tattoos and tribal jewelry, was a living shield, and Ilara clung to it. Realizing that survival and trust were entwined tonight, the first shadow moved closer, silent but deliberate. And the real test of strength, courage, and cunning was about to begin. Ilara knew that every second counted, that every decision could mean life or death. Yet she felt a strange surge of hope. Perhaps the last man who could love her, the warrior of the land, was also the one who could guide her through the darkness that had followed her so relentlessly. And as the canyon held its breath, as the fire flickered and shadows danced, the stage was set. Tokoda's muscles flexed, his long black hair brushing his shoulders, tribal jewelry shifting with his movements. And the strangers paused, sensing the strength they could not yet measure. The night was far from over. Danger lurked. Secrets waited to be revealed. And Ilara, alone no longer, would soon discover the true depth of courage, trust, and the wild bond that connected her to the muscular Native American warrior who had appeared when hope seemed impossible. The canyon grew darker as the wind rose, carrying dust, leaves, and the faint smell of smoke from distant fires. Ilara tightened the straps of her native-style dress. Her body tense, and felt her baby kick, a small reminder that she carried more than just fear in this night of shadows. Takoda stood beside her, long black hair falling over his shoulders, beads and bones from his tribal jewelry shifting with each controlled movement. He was shirtless, muscular, fit like a model, small tribal tattoos tracing his arms and chest, and his eyes dark and sharp in the firelight. Every muscle seemed to hum with anticipation, and Ilara leaned against him instinctively, feeling both safe and electrified by his presence. The strangers had split, one group circling from the ridge above, the other moving through the canyon floor. Ilara could see the outline of their hats and the glint of weapons, and she swallowed hard. Takada's gaze swept the terrain, calculating, precise, every motion he made deliberate. "They will test our patience first," he murmured, voice low but steady. "Patience and strategy are stronger than brute force alone." Ilara nodded, though her heart pounded. "I can help," she whispered, clutching her belly. "Tell me what to do." Tokoda's dark eyes softened briefly, then sharpened again as he assessed the approaching threats. "Stay behind me. Observe. Learn. Every choice matters." From the ridge above, a rock tumbled, sending a cascade of pebbles crashing down. The strangers were probing, looking for weakness. Tokoda shifted slightly, his muscular arms flexing, small tattoos catching the dim moonlight, his long black hair swinging in a calculated rhythm. "They see the fire. They think it gives them an advantage." "It doesn't," he said quietly. Ilara's pulse quickened as she followed his lead, crouching behind a boulder while Tokoda positioned himself where he could see both the ridge and the canyon floor. She admired the way his fit, model-like body moved, every motion a combination of strength and instinct. He didn't need to speak loudly. His presence alone radiated control, and the strangers seemed to sense it even as they crept closer. Suddenly, one of the raiders, a man with a cruel expression and a scar across his cheeks, too close to the firelight. Takoda's gaze locked on him instantly, long black hair brushing his shoulders, beads of tribal jewelry jingling faintly, his muscular chest flexing with suppressed energy. Without a sound, he moved. A blur of power, he leaped to a small rise, cutting off the man's path. The raider froze, unsure how to proceed, and Ilara gasped quietly. She had never seen anyone move like that, not with such control, strength, and calm. "Keep low," Takoda instructed, voice low, almost a growl. "Do not draw attention." Ilara pressed herself closer to the rock, trying to steady her breathing, her belly tightening with tension and fear. She could feel Tokoda's energy beside her, his muscles coiled, ready to strike, yet somehow calming her at the same time. She had been alone for so long, shunned and hunted, and yet in this moment she realized she had someone to trust, someone whose strength was more than physical. Above them, the other group of raiders began signaling with hand gestures, attempting to coordinate their movement. Takoda's eyes followed every motion. "They underestimate the land," he muttered. "They underestimate what it does to those who respect it." Ilara's mind spun. She had always survived through caution and intuition, but she had never faced such coordinated danger. Now, under Takoda's guidance, she understood that survival demanded more than instinct, demanded strategy, observation, and trust in the right person. She could feel the baby stir, as if sensing the tension in the air, and she whispered a small prayer for protection, hoping Takoda's strength would be enough. The scarred man finally moved again, stepping toward the canyon floor where the firelight flickered. Takoda's muscles tensed visibly, the small tattoos along his arms and chest almost alive in their subtle detail. And he shifted, beads of his tribal jewelry jingling softly. He was a predator and protector in one, ready to defend what mattered most. Ilara watched, awed and terrified, as he prepared for what seemed inevitable. Suddenly, from a side ridge, a shot rang out, arrows whistling through the air. Ilara ducked instinctively, clutching her belly. One arrow buried itself in the canyon wall behind them, shattering rock and sending dust into the air. Takoda's eyes flared with controlled fury. Without a word, he moved, muscles rippling, long black hair swinging over his shoulders, small tribal tattoos visible in the flickering firelight. He leaped toward the attackers with speed and precision that seemed impossible, intercepting another arrow mid-flight with his knife, then sliding into position to block the next move. Ilar's breath caught in her throat. He was more than strong. He was a force of nature, molded by the land and by survival. Each motion a perfect combination of skill, instinct, and courage. She realized that her trust in him was not misplaced. He was the protector she had been seeking all along. But the raiders were cunning, had studied the terrain, understood the canyon's shadows, and were determined to corner their prey. From another ridge, a horseman charged, forcing Takoda to pivot, muscles coiling, chest flexing with his fit, model-like strength. Ilara pressed against a boulder, heart racing as she watched the warrior deflect and redirect, using the terrain itself as a weapon. His long black hair whipped around his shoulders, beads and bones from his tribal jewelry, catching the moonlight, small tattoos along his chest and arms gleaming faintly. Then a shout echoed from the canyon entrance, a warning, perhaps from Sienna, who had taken a position on higher ground. Ilara realized that the subplots of this night were intertwining. Sienna's intelligence, the raiders' greed, Takoda's skill, and her own survival instincts. Each element was a thread in a dangerous tapestry, and one wrong move could unravel everything. Takoda glanced at Ilara briefly, his eyes dark and sharp. "Stay low. Trust your instincts." She nodded, heart pounding, and crouched behind a rock, watching as the confrontation escalated. Takoda moved like a shadow, striking with precision, deflecting attacks, using his strength and agility in ways that left her both terrified and mesmerized. His muscular body, long black hair, small tattoos, and tribal jewelry were not just for show, they were extensions of his being, tools of survival honed over years in the wild. Ilara's thoughts flicked to the child inside her, and a surge of determination replaced some of her fear. She realized that her survival was intertwined with Takoda's, and the future of her baby depended on every calculated move they made. She scanned the canyon floor, noting rocks that could serve as cover, small alcoves for hiding, and potential escape routes if the situation worsened. Her native-style dress brushed the ground as she shifted, practical yet protective, blending with the shadows as she prepared to act if necessary. The raiders began to regroup, sensing Takoda's skill and strength. They had underestimated him, underestimated the canyon, underestimated the bond forming between Ilara and the muscular Native American warrior beside her. But now they pressed, arrows flying, rocks dislodged, hooves pounding. Every sense screamed danger, and yet in the chaos, Ilara felt a strange clarity. She was alive. She was not alone. And Takoda was there, muscular, strong, unyielding, ready to defend what was his and what she now understood belonged to both of them. survival, trust, and perhaps something more. The night stretched on, each moment heavier than the last, the tension coiling like a living thing around the canyon. Dakota moved with precision, blocking, deflecting, and striking, each motion a testament to his experience and power. His long black hair fell over his shoulders in a curtain of shadow, beads and tribal jewelry chiming softly, small tattoos along his arms and chest, catching flickers of moonlight. Lara watched, heart pounding, as he faced each new threat with calm and strength, a muscular, model-like presence that radiated protection. And then, above the chaos, a scream rang, a distraction. Ilara's blood ran cold. She could see the shadows shifting, the raiders becoming more desperate, more dangerous. Tokoda's eyes flared with controlled intensity, and she felt the weight of the moment pressing down. The climax of this night, the turning point, was approaching. Every muscle in Tokoda's body flexed, every instinct sharpened, and Ilara knew that what happened next would decide everything. The canyon waited, silent except for the pounding hooves, flying arrows, and the occasional shout. Ilara's pulse raced. She clutched her belly, whispered a silent prayer, and leaned into the strength radiating from the muscular Native American warrior beside her. Long black hair falling over his shoulders, beads of tribal jewelry catching the moonlight, small tattoos gleaming faintly. She realized that the night's true test was not just survival, it was trust, courage, and the courage to face a future uncertain, with the last man who could love her standing beside her. The first light of dawn broke over the canyon, painting the jagged cliffs in soft golds and pinks. The wind had calmed, leaving only the faint whisper of leaves and the distant call of a hawk. Ilara's heart still raced from the night's chaos, but the immediate threat had passed. The raiders had fled, scattered by Tokoda's skill, strength, and unmatched knowledge of the canyon. He stood over the ridge, long black hair catching the morning sun, beads and bones of his tribal jewelry glinting faintly, muscles rippling under his shirtless fit, model-like frame, small tribal tattoos tracing his arms and chest. He exuded a calm power that made Ilara's fear slowly give way to relief. She stepped from behind the boulder where she had sheltered, her native-style dress shifting with each careful step. Her hands rested protectively over her belly, feeling the tiny life within her as if it had shared in the night's tension. Tokoda's dark eyes met hers, and she could see both pride and a gentle reassurance in his gaze. He had protected her, had fought for her, had made the canyon itself a fortress around her and her unborn child. "You're safe now," he said, voice low but steady, the words carrying the weight of truth. "They will not follow. Not today." Ilara nodded, letting a breath escape that she hadn't realized she had been holding. She had never believed in hope so fully, never imagined that someone could be both protector and companion in one. The muscular Native American warrior before her had proven himself more than capable, not just in strength but in patience, strategy, and unwavering loyalty. She felt a warmth spread through her, a mixture of gratitude and something deeper, something she had thought long lost: trust. Sienna, the woman who had warned them, stepped forward from the ridge where she had kept watch. "You are lucky to have found him," she said, her voice softer now, tinged with awe. "Tokoda is not just a warrior, he is the guardian of these lands. Few survive what you've survived." Ilara glanced at Tokoda, noting the way his long black hair fell around his shoulders, beads of tribal jewelry moving with the breeze, small tattoos visible on his muscular arms and chest. Even in quiet, he radiated strength and resilience. "I owe my life to him," Ilara admitted softly, "and more than that, I think I've found someone I can trust completely." Tokoda's gaze softened, and he stepped closer, his fit, model-like, muscular build impressive in the early morning light. "Trust is earned, and I will not break it," he said simply. His voice carried a weight that made Ilara's heart flutter, a mixture of reassurance and sincerity that only strengthened the fragile bond forming between them. The canyon seemed to exhale as the sun rose higher, shadows retreating, revealing the beauty and raw power of the landscape. Ilara allowed herself to take in the moment, feeling the first flickers of peace since her long journey had begun. She thought of the months she had spent running, hiding, and fearing rejection, and realized that none of that mattered now. She had found safety, and more importantly, she had found someone who could love her wholly, even with her unborn child, even with her past. "Come," Tokoda said, extending his hand. "There's water nearby and food. You need rest, and the land needs time to heal from what passed last night." Ilara took his hand, feeling the warmth and strength in his grip. His muscular body, long black hair, small tribal tattoos, and tribal jewelry all seemed to anchor her to this place. To the present moment where survival and trust intertwined, she allowed herself to be led through the canyon, every step a reminder that she was no longer alone. As they walked, Sienna followed, offering guidance on safe paths through the terrain. She spoke quietly about the land, about hidden springs and edible plants, about trails that had been used for centuries by those who respected the canyon. Ilara listened, absorbing every detail, knowing that her survival and the survival of her child depended on understanding this place as deeply as Toka did. By the time they reached the small hidden spring, the sun was fully above the cliffs, glinting off the water and turning the canyon walls into a mosaic of light and shadow. Ilara knelt at the edge, letting her hands brush the cool water, while Dakota gathered herbs and prepared a small meal. His muscular arms flexed with effortless strength, the beads and bones of his tribal jewelry clinking softly, tattoos catching the sunlight. Every movement was deliberate, calm, precise, a reminder that this man was not just strong, but skilled, intelligent, and deeply connected to the land. Ilara ate slowly, savoring the warmth of the meal and the quiet that followed the night's chaos. She glanced at Takoda, long black hair falling over his shoulders as he worked, and felt a strange sense of completeness. For months, she had felt abandoned, hunted, and alone, yet now she was with a man who embodied protection, skill, and honor. She thought of her child, growing safely inside her, and felt hope for the first time in a long while. Sienna watched silently, then finally spoke. "The raiders will regroup, but they will not find you here, not with Tokuda guarding these lands." Ilara nodded. "I understand now. I am not just running anymore. I have a place, and someone who will stand with me." Tokuda looked up, long black hair brushing his shoulders, beads and small tribal tattoos catching the light. "You are strong, Ilara," he said. "You survived alone until now. Together we will face what comes next. But no, this your courage is as important as my strength." The canyon felt alive with possibility. The danger had passed, but the lessons remained. Ilara realized that survival depended not just on hiding or fleeing, but on connection, trust, and courage. She had found that in Tokuda, a muscular Native American warrior whose long black hair, tribal jewelry, and fit, model-like body reflected both strength and humanity. She had found a partner in the wilderness, someone who could stand with her as she faced the future. As the day grew warmer, they set up a small shelter near the spring, reinforcing it with branches and stones. Tokuda moved with a quiet confidence, muscles flexing. Tattoos visible on his arms and chest, beads and bones of his tribal jewelry moving softly with each action. Ilara helped, her native-style dress practical and flowing, allowing her to move freely. They worked together seamlessly, the bond between them growing with every shared task. By the time evening fell, the canyon was calm again, bathed in golden light. Tokuda built a small fire, and they sat together, sharing stories of the past, the lessons they had learned, and the hope that now filled their hearts. Ilara spoke of her village, of the hardships she had faced, and Tokuda listened. Long black hair falling over his shoulders, small tribal tattoos visible, beads of jewelry catching the firelight, offered words of understanding, compassion, and quiet strength. "You are not alone anymore," he said finally. "Not you, not your child. We will face the world together." Ilara's heart swelled with relief and gratitude. For months, she had felt the sting of rejection, the weight of solitude, and the constant fear for her unborn child. Now, with Toko by her side, the canyon no longer felt like a trap, felt like home. The last man who could love her had not only appeared, but had chosen to stand beside her, strong, unyielding, and deeply human. As night fell, stars appearing one by one over the cliffs, Ilara allowed herself to rest, leaning against Takoda's muscular, shirtless body. His long black hair brushed against her shoulder, beads and tribal jewelry shifting softly, small tattoos catching the firelight. The tension of the past nights faded, replaced by warmth, trust, and a fragile but growing sense of peace. The canyon held them in quiet, and Alara realized that the journey had not just been about escape or survival. It had been about finding connection, courage, and the realization that even in the harshest wilderness, love and protection could exist. She felt the life within her, safe, and knew that with Takoda, they had a future worth fighting for. As they looked out over the canyon, the sun dipping behind distant cliffs, Ilara whispered softly, "I never thought I would find this. Hope, not after everything." Takoda's dark eyes met hers, long black hair falling over his shoulders, muscular chest rising and falling with calm strength. Small tattoos and tribal jewelry gleaming faintly in the fading light. "Hope," he said, "is never gone. Just waits for those strong enough to claim it." Ilara smiled, feeling the weight of fear lift from her shoulders. For the first time in months, she felt a sense of belonging, of trust, and of love. She knew challenges would come again, but now she was ready. She had survived. She had been protected. And she had found someone who would walk beside her, a muscular Native American warrior whose long black hair, tribal jewelry, and fit model-like body reflected strength, humanity, and loyalty. And as the stars blinked awake over the canyon, Ilara whispered a small prayer of gratitude, knowing that the night of danger had passed, that the raiders would never return, and that together she and Takoda had found not just survival, but something far more precious, a future filled with hope, love, and life.